Hello and welcome to this slightly belated episode for Active War Direct Action. In my rush to get into the game and play it, I realized, wait a second, this is from the era of games that might still have, some decent manuals. Because just from my childhood, I don't remember there being really any story of significance in the or anything really of significance beyond, the basic. Here's how the basics of how to play the game. Here's the basic troubleshooting steps you should do in the general's manuals. But after doing the Black Hawk Down manual, I'm like, wait, this might have some good stuff, and it turns out there is story in it. I definitely won't be going through the whole manual because like 2/3 of it is just unit descriptions, so I don't want spoilers or anything like that. So I'll briefly scroll through them. So if you want to read it, you can pause the video and look at it. But I'd rather not have story spoilers, because outside of a couple of skirmishes that I've done against the AI, I haven't played the campaign. So I'm gonna be surprised for a change. Anyways, we have troubleshooting, how to troubleshoot, PEGI rating system, so this is probably a UK EU version of the manual, which is fine. But yeah, here's one of a couple of pages of story. So, experts, no end in sight for oil crisis. As the price of crude reached a new record price of $75.30 a barrel yesterday, a new report from the American Energy Production Group issued dire warnings today that no end to today's oil crisis is in sight, and again called on the White House to act. The report tackles the by now well-known reason to the crisis, that a rapidly growing global demand is quickly outstripping an equally rapidly diminishing world oil supply, by racking up some remarkable numbers. Last year's global worldwide consumption rate was a startling 6% on a year-by-year basis. Global car sales last year were up 4%, and global investment in alternative energy sources was down for the fourth year in a row, from $370 billion last year to $352 billion this year. The report puts most of the blame on the drying up of oil wells in the Middle East, but Americans are certainly partly responsible too. Their love affair with SUVs continues unabated, but developing countries have found that they too have a taste for the black stuff. China in particular is relying on oil to fuel its expanding economy. Everybody, it seems, needs oil. And as demand is growing, supplies are dwindling. Energy companies have cut their production quotas dramatically. The reasons are varied. Some cite dwindling reserves, while others point to the increasing cost of extracting remaining oil reserves. The bottom line, though, is the same. Companies are telling us that we are all running out of oil. Where are we headed? Nowhere we want to be, if history is any indication. The 1970s Arab embargo was devastating. Libya raised the price of oil overnight from $4.90 a barrel to $8.25 a barrel. Several Middle Eastern countries voted to stop supplying oil to the United States altogether, effectively turning off the spigot. OPEC nations put up a united front, leaving the global community on tenterhooks. The resulting price hikes and long lines at the pumps were the tip of the iceberg. The embargo led to the 1-2 punch of rampant inflation and global recession. It took years for the American economy to recover, and the 1970s crisis was artificial. OPEC chose to stop producing oil for political reasons. They had the goods, they just didn't want to sell to us. Once the political storm had passed, the oil started to flow again. Today's crisis won't be solved by appeasement policies. There's no angry sheik in this scenario sitting on an oil well refusing to sell his wares. The problem is more fundamental. The oil man can't sell us what they don't have. See extras, page 3. And we have a nice little table of contents here. Here's our next chunk of lore. Experts, continued from page 1. What little crude there is on the market is selling at usurious prices. The energy companies deny responsibility for the price inflation. In their view, the global economy had overwhelmed any efforts at price controls. By this logic, it is the customer's rampant demand that is setting the price. Some may ask whatever happened to market competition. Economics 101 professors are clear in their explanation of how industry competition benefits the consumer. But today's oil industry is far different than it was in the 1970s. Mergers and acquisitions have transformed the marketplace. Companies that were once big are now enormous. Historically, oil companies have resisted consolidation, eager to guard their piece of the pie. But as that pie has dwindled, these companies first accepted and then embraced a merger and acquisition policy as a way to stay afloat in turbulent times. The situation is bleak, but one company, TransGlobal, presents itself as a small light at the end of the tunnel. CEO Harold Kingman announced in Davos last month that his company will soon begin drilling in Egypt. TGE engineers have developed new technology that, if successful, will unlock the Egyptian oil reserves previously thought too expensive to extract. In an effort condemned by other oil conglomerates as predatory pricing, TransGlobal is pricing its crude at 10% below the set commodity price of $75 a barrel. TGE traders are forthright about their belief that now is the time to capture market share in anticipation of the coming oil glut. This scenario holds its own dangers. If TransGlobal succeeds in pushing other energy companies out of the market, competition disappears, and with it, the built-in market mechanisms that keep prices competitive. But that problem is theoretical. Today's crisis is real. The usual getting started guide, explanation of the main menu, explanation of options, and our next piece of lore. Make it stop. Gas crisis rages on. These days, Allison McCabe of Dallas can't believe her eyes. Is this thing broken? She asked, tapping the gas gauge at the pump. That can't be right. But it is. The total comes to $147, and that's for one tank of gas. Allison shakes her head and laughs. At this rate, my car is going to cost me more than my mortgage. Americans across the country are facing the same shocking news at the pump, and they aren't laughing. The price of gasoline continues to skyrocket. Drivers sit in their cars for hours waiting to fill up their tanks, and that's on days when they can even buy gas. 65% of gas stations report that their tanks have run dry at least once in the past week. Hey, Ash. I guess my cat wants to read the manual too. No doubt about it, America is facing the worst energy crisis it's seen since the 1970s, and those really were the good old days. During the Carter administration, prices did rise dramatically. See Stop, page 11, which is the very next page. Stop, continued from page 10. Eventually, though, they leveled out. The international community worked together to resolve the crisis. Within a few short years, the 70s crisis was a distant memory, and Americans quickly returned to their expansive way of life. Today, no such solution seems likely or even possible. Prices continue to climb, and there's no end in sight. The crisis is having a ripple effect across all sectors of the economy. Trucking companies can't afford to send their fleet out as often as they once did. That, in turn, is limiting the flow of goods to retail stores, especially big box stores like Costco and Sam's Club. Perishable goods, in particular like produce, are impacted by the change. Business owners say they have no choice but to pass the cost increase onto their customers. That would explain why red peppers are now selling for an average of $8 a pound. To accommodate this new reality, Americans are making some serious changes to their lifestyles and spending patterns. Summer car trips are a thing of the past. People have cut back dramatically on their household expenses. Gone are the weekend movies and impulse purchases. Couples like Scott and Christian Lang of San Diego no longer treat themselves to date night away from their two young sons, Jake and Elroy. We can't even afford the babysitter, much less the dinner tab, says Scott. Anecdotal stories like these are backed up by government statistics. The Federal Reserve reports that discretionary spending is down 42% in the last 12 months. Analysts worry that this dramatic drop in consumer spending will send the American economy, already in a precarious position, into a tailspin from which it may never recover. Other observers are more optimistic. Environmentalists, in particular, see a large silver lining to today's black cloud. With fewer vehicles on the road, less harmful pollutants are entering the atmosphere. Some consumers are making the switch to electric cars. Bailey Mendelson, a spokeswoman for Honda, says the auto company has seen a huge spike in consumer interest for their hybrid vehicles. More importantly, some say, Americans are changing some long-standing and some say destructive habits. Carpooling is back in vogue, so is public transportation. Washington, D.C.'s metro system has seen a 73% jump in occupancy in the last 6 months. Buses are filled to capacity during peak hours, and bicycle sales are at an all-time high. Some people, like Brad Miller of Atlanta, Georgia, see an added benefit to his new lifestyle. He now uses his bike to commute to work, a 15-mile round trip he makes each workday, and he's lost about 10 pounds since June. How about that, he says. I never lost that much weight when I worked out at the gym. Mr. Miller no longer belongs to his neighborhood gym. He can't afford it. And just a basic explanation. The interface there, it looks like. Controls, issuing commands, so the usual, RTS game mechanics, telling you about what units can do what, tips on building your base. I think did we reach the end of the lore? Are we just scrolling now? Yeah. So, that adds... Oh, we got some lore. Alright. Pentagon, White House clash over counterterrorism. Rumors persist. European allies cautious. Washington, D.C. According to unnamed sources at the Pentagon, the president has authorized the creation of an elite counterterrorism unit, one authorized to operate outside of international authority. Such news, if true, would mark a turning point in America's fight against terrorism. Historically, even covert units have obeyed standards set by the United Nations during the Cold War. Shadow soldiers operating with impunity, said one Pentagon official who asked not to be named. That kind of unit can undermine our chain of command, and that kind of accountability is one of the tenets on which our modern army is based. Details remain sketchy, but there has been speculation that new counterterrorism units are currently operating in the European theater. Interest in counter-terrorist activities is at an all-time high following recent terrorist attacks in Zurich and Caracas. Yesterday, FEMA concluded its investigation into last month's oil refinery explosion in Houston, labeling the disaster an industrial accident. White House officials continue to deny reports that any such group exists, and some in the West Wing have gone so far as to question the Pentagon's motivations. The Pentagon has been pursuing an increase in federal funding for some time now, said one White House official. Their requests have been met with our full support, and both the House and Senate are considering appropriations bills as we speak. Despite this concrete support, there are factions within the Pentagon that would like to assert their dominance. Frankly, they'd like to be the only game in town. International reaction has been muted. At last week's European alliance meeting in Milan, officials expressed generic support for America's war on terror. Prime Minister Niles Philpott described America and Britain as great allies who stand shoulder to shoulder in this deadly and treacherous time. Attendees judiciously avoided discussing the situation in detail in public. Privately, however, officials expressed support for such a unit. The European Union has historically been more aggressive in the war on terror, and covert units have operated in Europe for decades. French counter-terrorist units, in particular, are granted a degree of leeway that would be almost unthinkable for an American fighting force. It is this difference, say Pentagon sources, that must be preserved. Can we remain a free and open society if we allow this kind of subterfuge to go on? Asked one official. Administration officials responded to these allegations with disbelief. Nobody is more interested in keeping secrets than the Pentagon, said one official. Somebody is trying to make political hay here, make no mistake about it. And yep, these are all the buildings and units in the game, so I'm not going to read these. I'm just going to scroll through them. But I will say so far, excuse me, I'm very impressed with their lore. It's very well written, reading almost like the sometimes real, sometimes fictional Jane's articles from the Fighter's Anthology manual. I really like the depth it went to, where it's, oil's high, it sucks, which is most games with an oil shortage. So here there's, they go through all the knock-on or knock-down effects, where it's like, well, now that gas is expensive, people aren't driving as much, trucking companies are charging more for shipping and trying to go out as little as they can as such, so then everything else becomes expensive, which creates a further lack of spending. So, I really like that. And it looks like we got, what is this? Sumoi, is Is that Finland? It says Finnish? I don't know. Swanks. Sweden, maybe? And Portuguese. It's an odd combination to have. And then, yeah, all the credits here. So, again, as I'll restate in episode 1, since I did that first, the game was made by Eugen Systems of Wargame fame and published by Atari. Well, that's nice. This is where they're starting to transition to the web as the official support forum for games. Like here, they're like, oh yeah, our numbers change sometimes. You got all the different billings for customer service. An advertisement for another Atari game, Driver, which I don't think I've heard of before. But yeah, that's a thankfully a much quicker read than the Delta Force manual of the lore in Active War Direct Action, at least going into it. So gives a little more context. So I think when the when that oil refinery, or not refinery, that oil well blows up in the first mission when you capture the guy, I think that's supposed to be more of a, oh no, they're going to get even higher. And the Houston oil bombing or whatever that they mention is what kicks off the second mission. So this adds a lot more context to what's going to happen in the game. So kind of looking forward to it, and the idea of, you know, accountability in the military, which is why we have things work the way they do. I wonder if that's going to be a plot point, but I was kind of surprised that, like, oh yeah, Europe totally is okay with this. That was actually surprising to me, but in any case, thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for next time, and stay safe out there, and we'll see you then.